The final speaker in this session is Dr. Jamie Mackay, who's the Business and Development Manager for Higher Education. Economic Modelling Systems International. Again, a different angle on things. Over to you.
Thank you very much. And you pronounced my surname correctly, but I sense a little bit of Scottish in you, so that's probably why. It's great whenever I go up to Scotland and they kind of see my name. It's always, oh, you're a Mackay. It's like, yes, excellent, I'm in Scotland. I'm a big fan of top trumps, so I'm going to see how many cards I can collect from you, Neil, how many warnings you can give me. Just to say, the S that is actually specialists. We're specialists. We do have systems, but we're specialists, but that's okay. Yes, so this wonderful title, Productivity, Core Missions and Impacts, Alternatives and Partnerships. Just a little bit of background to Emsi. The way I like to kind of describe the company is if you imagine a world where the education and training that is out there actually aligns really nicely to labour market needs. It'll be a lovely world to live in. We're never going to get there, but that's the sort of world that we are working towards. We offer labour market information, working with colleges, with universities, with local authorities, with LEPs, to help them get a better understanding about the regions, the economies that they actually serve. So in terms of a bit of an outline, so I'm going to give a little bit of background, going to look at some of the data, regional data. I'm going to be focusing on the East Midlands and West Midlands just as some examples. And also thinking about students after they've actually sort of graduated as well, forecasting ahead, thinking about what sort of expectations, what sort of things they're going to be doing, where they're going to be going, those sorts of things. And I've got a few questions that I'd certainly be interested in sort of discussing. So in terms of background, 3 areas that I wanted to focus on. The marketplace itself, looking at productivity, but also including employability in that as well. And Devolution Revolution. There's been a little bit of talk about looking at regions, but the devolution is something that's quite exciting. And Tim talked earlier on about universities sleepwalking into degree apprenticeships. I see a little bit of sleepwalking into the devolution agenda with the universities as well. So in terms of the marketplace, that font is far too tiny, but I'll just read it out. So the blue one is the market. There's been a lot of talk today about provision being very much informed by student demand. What are students interested in? What are they studying? What do they want to do? And actually where we come in is we actually help universities and colleges in particular look at the demand from employers as well, the skills gaps. And working with universities like Robert Gordon University up in Aberdeen, for example, once you've got that sort of whole picture, arguably your portfolio of courses is a little bit better informed. You are supplying courses that students want to do, but more importantly, they're also aligned to jobs that are out there as well, so they're leading to sort of destinations. The green one's looking at delivery models. So you've got the traditional, I talk about the 3-year residential, so traditional undergraduate program. Part-time provision, taken a huge battering over the last few years. Love to see that sort of picking up again. You've got online provision, blended provision, which mentioned, has been talked a little bit about today, and also work-based, and I would include some degree apprenticeships within that, but also a little bit of online and blended as well. And then the different sort of providers, so the yellow one, so universities, the alternative and private providers. Let's not forget colleges as higher education institutions as well. It's something they've been able to do since the beginning of the century, and certainly our work is showing that they are more and more interested in looking at their own sort of higher education provision and seeing that as sort of new income streams. In-house as well, Deloitte talked about actually recruiting students from a lot younger age and then helping to sort of train them in-house. And yes, overseas as well. Increasingly we're seeing universities in Europe coming to UCAS conferences, for example, and UCAS events, and talking to 16, 17-year-olds and talking about the sorts of courses that they offer. And it's interesting the thought about international universities actually having a campus somewhere in the UK as well. Okay, so productivity and employability. Liz Shutt from University Alliance, she wrote an article in The Economist last year, and something she said chimed really nicely with our work. We need to develop skills in interaction with business and in preparing students for the world of work. I wholeheartedly agree with that. Probably need to mention the productivity plan, and in that it cites the need for universities to contribute more to economic growth by building better and more direct links with industry. Tuition fees, we've seen that it seems to be focusing students' minds a lot more. I wrote a blog article last year saying that 2015 was very much the year where students are becoming more career focused than they've ever been before. And there's evidence the Graduate Careers Survey 2015 cited students actually engaging with the Careers and Employability Service in their first year, not in their second year or their third year or even later, but actually right at the beginning saying, okay, this is the course I'm on, how is it actually going to lead me to get a career? Looking at placements, asking about work experience, internships, all those sorts of things as well. I want this to be a means to an end. We're seeing less of people going into education and enjoying the experience for education's sake. There's a lot more focus on, if I'm going to be paying this money, I want to see the outcomes. And it's great to be working with, talking to alternative providers such as BPP, because they've been doing that for years. HESA data on subject uptake as well. Students are attending, more likely to be picking those courses that arguably lead into careers. Now, that's not to say that humanities subjects and art subjects don't bring value. I've got a psychology degree, and people often say, well, I'm a PhD as well, and people often say to me, you've got a PhD in psychology, why on earth are you a business development manager? And actually, if you look at my career pathway, you'll see that the skills that I developed during my time at university have actually been transferring and picking up new skills, and that's led me to where I am today. So universities are being encouraged not only to impact on productivity, government's saying, we need more higher level skills to increase productivity, but also improve the employability of their students. So we want you to work a little bit more closely with business to make sure that you're giving your students the right skills to go and get those sort of jobs. In terms of the Devolution Revolution, Mike Boxall in The Guardian last month said universities must join forces with employers in their regions to produce graduates who meet the changing needs of industry. So we all know last year George Osborne mentioned the Devolution Revolution as part of the spending review, and Kevin Richardson, if you're not familiar with Kevin Richardson, you're interested in devolution, follow him. Have a look at the sort of stuff that he's coming out with. He's doing a really good commentary on what's sort of going on. Recently, he did a blog post about 6 regional investment opportunities for higher education. More and more money is being sort of moved away from central government, so traditional pots of money that universities are familiar with, and typically they would go to central government to get those pots. They're being siphoned off into regional areas, and one of the key players there is LEPs, the local enterprise partnerships. And it's interesting going out to universities and saying, how do you engage with your LEP? What sorts of things are you doing? And they say, oh, we've got a DVC or a PVC or somebody sits on the board. Well, what else are you doing? I'm doing some work with Sheffield Hallam University at the moment, yes, their DVC is on the board, but actually one of their senior managers is also heads up the skills group, and is working with us to look at the sorts of data insights that we've got to help boost the Sheffield economy. And it may not surprise you that there's been a lot of press about Sheffield Hallam being one of the sort of leaders, driving forces in degree apprenticeships over the last few days as well. Okay, so good data is key. So if universities want to align with the needs of the regional economy, they need to understand what those are. National picture is great, but if you have a look at the national picture and then start to break it down into regions, you'll see differences. Good labour market intelligence can uncover those needs by tapping into industry and occupation trends. So in your region, which industries are set to grow over the next few years. Within those industries, which graduate occupations are actually set to grow as well, actually helping to drive that change. And then once you've got that, you can then map those occupations back to the courses that you do and say, okay, is there some alignment there? How's there alignment? So if we look at the East Midlands, just to start with, for example, around about 2 million jobs in 2015, average earnings about £21,500. Exports and imports are up there, and a population of 4.7 million. If we just contrast that with the West Midlands, just quickly, so 2.5 million jobs, £23,000 average income, population of 5.7 million, and exports and imports in there. Okay, so giving some sort of context. Now, this is where I'm going to need to divert to here because the graph hasn't come up properly on the screen. But if we look at the East Midlands, so the top industries that are forecast to grow over the next 3 years. Okay, so the first one is temp employment agency activities. We're going to see some growth there. Restaurants, mobile food service activities, followed by hospital activities, followed by public administration, defence and compulsory social security, so public sector there. And then finally warehousing and storage. I'll make sure you guys have got these and have got the numbers as well. And yeah, the graph looks like that. What's interesting in the West Midlands is that temp agencies is in there at number 1. Hospital activities is in there at number 2. Warehousing and storage is in there at number 3. The restaurants and mobile food service activities come through in number 4. And then rather than it being public sector, that's actually replaced by accounting, bookkeeping, and auditing and tax consultancy, BPP, take note. So those are the industries. Those are the industries that are forecast to grow the most over the next few years in terms of jobs. Okay, and there's the graph. But then what about the occupations? Okay, so if we take those industries, put them all together, and then interrogate the data and say, okay, of these industries, what are the top occupations that are also set to grow over the next few years? And I'm only focusing on those that are typically employ people that have got a level 3 or above qualification. Okay, it's not going to show up on the screen, but in the East Midlands, the first one is nurses. That's pretty much the same across most of Great Britain. The second is nursing auxiliaries and assistants. So I think the University of Reading brought on a new programme a few years ago that will address that one. Not for the East Midlands, mind you, but anyway. Restaurant and catering establishment managers and proprietors. That's the third one. Primary and nursery education teaching professionals is the fourth one, and then medical practitioners. So with those in mind, you guys from universities are then beginning to think, okay, what do we do in the East Midlands? How do those occupations actually map back to provision? Do we offer courses that train for those occupations or not? The West Midlands, very similar. Number 1 is nurses. Number 2 is the nursing auxiliaries and assistants. Number 3 is not restaurants. It's chartered and certified accountants. Number 4 is medical practitioners, and number 5 is the primary and nursery teachers. So you're going to pick up a card then, yeah? Okay. So that's the occupations. Okay, and you're mapping those occupations then back to your provision. Also thinking about the types of provision as well. Now, these are jobs that are expected to grow, forecast to grow over the next few years. And if you go out to the employers in those industries and ask about those particular occupations, some of them will say, oh yes, we're expecting we're going to need a few more in a few years' time. So if you're offering those courses right now and they're going to be graduating in 3 or 4 years' time, fantastic, it's going to meet the needs. But you also might get some employers that say, well, actually, Jamie, that's really good that we're going to have some highly qualified graduates coming out in a few years' time. But you know what? We need them kind of now, or we'd like to develop those skills now. And that's where I really think degree apprenticeships can kind of come in. Something that Nicola didn't mention was this from the Chartered Management Institute, which was a survey that was done recently. Parents in the know strongly support the new degree apprenticeships. 61% would rather their child took a degree apprenticeship with a major company than Oxbridge degree. 70% say a degree apprenticeship is better value for money. And if money were even if money were no object, 62% of parents would still prefer their child took a degree apprenticeship. Don't forget the parents in this whole scenario. They're really key stakeholders in this. And if parents are saying these sorts of things, then that's going to play an important role, because they're going to be talking to their sons and daughters. And you mentioned widening participation, which I'm going to mention a little bit later on as well. In some cases, these parents didn't go to university themselves. They want the best for their sons and daughters. They want them to enter the labour market as high as possible to be able to sustain decent employment with decent salaries. And they're looking at degree apprenticeships because they've got no experience of higher education in some cases, but they might have some understanding of apprenticeship. And all of a sudden we've got degree apprenticeships, so these are university equivalent. And you don't have to pay tuition fees. I mean, this is gold dust. This is brilliant. Brilliant news. The AGR that Nicola mentioned as well, so graduate recruitment slows as apprenticeships take off. So are we going to see more companies actually offering more apprenticeships, more apprenticeship opportunities rather than graduate opportunities? There's my 2 minutes, okay. And it was interesting, Biz just did a map with the list of the starts for 2014-15. Again, some really interesting regional differences there, so there's definitely some work to be done. Really pleased to see the South East, where we're based, is actually quite high at 65,000. And yeah, absolutely welcomed the report from the UK. Just wanted to read this out. So, understand what the demand for a degree apprenticeship looks like through use of national and local information on priority sectors, skill shortages, labour market trends. Engage with strategically important employers and work closely with LEPs and other stakeholders such as local authorities. That's one of the recommendations the report makes. Absolutely. Okay, so very quickly, in terms of post-graduation, need to be looking at graduate migration. So this is data from Charlie Ball, who, if you haven't seen his work, he does some really good stuff with a lot of the HESA data. And he was looking at different regions and what's happening to the graduates after they've kind of finished university. Do they live locally, go to a local university, and then stay in local employment afterwards? Or do they live locally, go to a university in another region, and then come back? He defined loyals, returners, stayers, and incomers. And what I'm particularly excited about is the loyals. So these are ones that live locally, go to a local university, and then stay in the region. That is helping to grow the regional economy. And then you've got returners. So there's something, graduates are going away and then coming back in again. They're coming back for the jobs, and they're helping to grow that economy. I'm going to skip that one. Where will graduates work? The number of universities I've been to, and I ask, well, which businesses you're working with, and they will reel off all of these big multinational organisations. That's great. It doesn't really show it very well on here, but there's a tiny little grey bit at the end. Those are the large organisations. These orange ones, those are medium-sized organisations. This blue one, those are small organisations. That's just in 2 regional economies. If you want to help grow your regional economy, you need to be working with SMEs. That's why government keeps going on about working with SMEs. There are more of them, and there are a lot more jobs employed by those SMEs. If you get an understanding of those as well, then you're going to be in a really good position. Right. Ooh, hello. There we go. Okay, and just something I wanted to go on briefly before I get the red card is, will graduates settle for one career? I've got the red card now, excellent. Generation Y graduates, so these are students that were born between 1980 and 1995. They expect swift career advancement and support for these progressions. The implications are that future generations will look to move around in the workforce. You guys are helping them to get into the workforce. Once they're in that first job, they will be looking to develop new skills, new talents to be able to then move into other careers. Tim, I think you and I, when we first spoke, you had quite an interesting sort of career trajectory. You'd gone into sort of different jobs, but arguably, again, you developed skills to enable you to move through. Generation Y, Generation Z, and whatever comes after Generation Z, they're going to be looking for lots and lots of different jobs. You're not going to be looking at nurses for the lifetime, lawyers for the lifetime, teachers for the lifetime. They're going to be going in and out of different careers. And actually, universities are well placed to be able to kind of support that. So in terms of partnerships, stop working now. It's telling me to shut up, I think, isn't it? In terms of partnerships, certainly looking at progression pathways. So Effie's been mentioned a little bit. Thank you for mentioning further education, because that's your pipeline. You need to be working with them, particularly if it's degree apprenticeships. What courses do they offer that will allow them to come through to you? But then also going on into business, and once they're in business, they're your alumni. They might be looking to upskill, or the business can be looking to upskill, so they'll be coming back to you. And you need to be in a place to be able to help sort of support that. Okay, I'll shut up now.
Okay, thank you very much.